First of all, it's great to have everybody here tonight. I want to recognize our MP tonight, John Williamson, right down the back. Everybody, big round of applause for John Williamson. Nice to have you here, John. All the way from Ottawa tonight. I'd like to introduce my council, and council, just wave your hand when I call your name. Councillor Adam Hatch here tonight. Councillor Darrell Tidd right up front. Councillor Alexa Dederakis just came in the door. Councillor Wayne McQuarrie, is he here, Wayne? Councillor Terry Lee, I know Terry's here, excellent. Councillor Mike Thompson, and we got Councillor Lisa McKay, Deputy Mayor Hatt. Did I miss anybody? Did I get everybody? And of course, I see CAO Jason Gaudette, so he's here tonight. I want to thank everybody for being here tonight. This is an important meeting for Eastern Charlotte. This meeting tonight is, the RCMP are here to improve communications, and they're going to share information tonight and try to answer some questions about the way policing services are delivered in the municipality of Eastern Charlotte. What they're going to be doing first is they'll be doing a quick question and answer. They'll do what are you going to do first? A presentation first, and then question and answer after that. And I'll ask any questions, just come up to the microphone afterwards, be respectful and constructive, and we do one person at a time. There are some specific investigations going on that they can't talk about, but afterwards, if you have something that you're not really comfortable about talking about in public, they're going to stay around a little after the meeting and be more than happy to talk to you one-on-one. So if you have anything specific that going on in your neighborhood, they'd be more than happy to talk to you about it and help you out with it. I want to introduce the RCMP here tonight. I want to thank them for being here tonight. First of all, our Superintendent, Andy Leclerc, here. District Commander for the West District RCMP. Inspector Martin Saunier, Officer in Charge of Operations of West District, the RCMP. Sergeant Scott McKenzie, all the way from St. Andrews, Acting District Advisory, NCO, RS 10 and 11, West District RCMP. That's long. Yeah. Sergeant Chris Henderson, Operations NCO, RS 10, West District RCMP, and his brother is actually the mayor of St. Andrews, Brad Henderson. He doesn't mention that very often, but he... It's a secret. The secret's out now. Yeah, and it's actually CHCO is actually taping this tonight, and it's not live, but it will be shown on YouTube later on, and it will be available to everybody to be able to watch. Kaylee Dupois, Planning Analyst, West District RCMP, right at the very end, right? Exactly, that's you. And Lisa Williams, right up front, is the Community Programs Officer for RS10. I'm going to turn this over now to Superintendent Andy Leclerc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'm just going to kind of kick it off with an intro, and I'd rather not do it from behind the table. Can you folks hear me if I'm up here? We're good? In the back room? Against the wall there, can you hear me? Anyways, first of all, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be here. Obviously, policing in New Brunswick has been a hot button topic. Getting to our rural communities and having that presence is a challenge. And we've been hearing loud and clear that people want to see improvements in communication and they want to connect more with the police. And we've seen that through the media, through communities talking about alternate police services and everything. So just to kind of give you a little background of you know, why we're here this evening and why I'm actually a huge proponent to getting out to these communities when we can get enough people in seats to actually get our message across. I arrived as the District Commander for New Brunswick, for Western New Brunswick 2 years ago. So in my position, I basically cover off everything from the Quebec border to Grand Manan, draw a line through the province of Minto and West. That's me. And so I'm heavily dependent, because it's such a huge area, I'm heavily dependent on my sergeants to connect with the community. Essentially, they're like the chief of police for those areas. And so when I arrived here, the message here, the message up in Bath and in Florenceville was we're not seeing the police. And that's just a big challenge with rural policing. But that doesn't mean we just say that's it, that's our answer, and just accept it. No, that's not it at all. We want to be connecting with you folks, and obviously we've had some things take place in the community that have resonated. I don't think there's anybody in the room here that isn't aware of what happened on Deer Island. You know, we had an issue years ago in Grand Manan, and you know, we don't have police officers full-time in those jurisdictions. I understand the community sees that, so we try to do our best with the barriers of rural policing, and we're always looking for ways to improve. So the purpose of this evening is to provide an overview of the policing service that the RCMP provides. We're your provincial police service, and everything that goes along with that. Now, just to kind of offer a bit of a historical perspective, I actually started policing in New Brunswick 33 years ago, and when the Miramichi was divided up, and I actually started in Chatham, New Brunswick. Policing is completely different than it was back then, and as a matter of fact, it's changed by leaps and bounds in the last 10 years with the specialized resources we have, things that we need to do, how we've had to evolve as a police agency to deal with things like tech crime. You know, yeah, we may not have a cop on every corner that you see, but we have people that are you know, online looking for sexual predators that are exploiting our children, and sometimes those stories don't get out, and we need to do a better job of telling those stories. I understand tonight that there's probably going to be some frustration in the room, and I want to hear about that frustration, but again, it needs to be constructive. One message that I've been trying to preach is you need to call the police, and then I hear, well, when we call the police, you know, we're waiting on hold, and so those stories are important for us to hear, and we'll follow up. We're accountable to you as a community, and so when we get into the weeds on some of the more local issues, that's why, you know, Sergeant Henderson is here, because he can follow up with those things. But one message that came out of Deer Island is that people need to call the police, because there wasn't a number of police calls related to that property, but when we drilled into it, there was evident that there was definitely criminal activity that was associated. And oddly enough, as we've been getting our message out to call more, there's been actually a lot of activity with respect to apprehensions in the community recently that you've seen in the media, where we've actually put some significant bad guys in jail, some property crime offenders in jail, and Chris and his team have been doing an amazing job, and I want that to continue. And a lot of that is because we're getting more cooperation with the community. And so tonight is about how we can work together collaboratively. You're going to have the opportunity to ask the tough questions, and you're also going to find out that we're accountable. And if you have a bad experience with a police officer, or you don't feel your file was properly managed, there are avenues to go down. It's tough for me to say, well, we're just not happy. Okay, I get that. Well, why aren't you happy? Let's have specifics, because that's my job. That ends with me. So what we'll do is we'll start off with this presentation, and there'll be a few questions. If we kind of get bogged down with questions, we'll move along. But I understand that if you have something that you want to get clarification on, just raise your hand and ask. We'll moderate it accordingly. And then after, we'll get into some good Q&A. We're here for as long as it takes. We're kind of putting an 8 o'clock governor on this, but if we go past that, that's fine. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my OIC of operations, and to just kind of explain his role. I oversee everything with respect to the West District. He is the boots on the ground, frontline operations enforcement. That's his specialty. The West District, we have about 200 regular members and employees that service the West District, so it's a lot of people. So this is a great opportunity tonight, folks, and I want you to take advantage of it, because I think it's going to be great for you to learn what we offer as a police service. And believe me, I understand we've taken some hits in the media recently, but I'm a proud member of the RCMP. Spent 33 years so far doing it. We are a world-class service, and but at the same time, engagement is a big piece. As we become more technical and more specialized, that's still an area that we need to concentrate on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my OIC of operations, and we'll go from there. So thanks very much.
Okay, so okay, so basically, as Andy mentioned, I'll be presenting. There's about 12 slides that I'll be going through. Basically, to give you guys an overview of how the RCMP New Brunswick work. As before I change any slide, if there's any questions relevant to what I just present, don't be afraid, just put your hand up and I'll get right immediately to you, okay? So at the end of that presentation, as Andy mentioned, we'll do a Q&A for anything that you want to bring to our attention. That's really why we're here. So to begin with, it's just an overview of the RCMP of New Brunswick, and we'll start with that. So I just want to start by explaining how the RCMP is divided in 3 different districts in New Brunswick. So we have the Northeast District, we have the Southeast District, and we have us, the West District. Each district is responsible for 4 regional service commissions. So for us, it's RC1, 12, 11, and 10. So those are the RSCs that we are responsible for service delivery in terms of policing. And each district has their own chain of command. So today we have the district commander, Superintendent Andy Leclerc here as, in the room, and myself, I'm the OIC for the West District. So every district has the same chain of command, and every RSC has their sergeant and their staff sergeant in their chain of command. So for the people here in the room that does not know Chris, but Sergeant Anderson here is responsible for the east end of RSC 10, and the full-time job for Scott, it's the west end of RSC 10. As we said earlier, he has a long title. He's currently the district advisor for RSC 11 and 10. So that's kind of to give you a quick.
Just when you finish this.
Yeah, just to give you a quick overview, like there's a structure for each district, and each district has their own area of responsibilities. Big picture, that's how it's divided for the RCMP. All right?
So, and I'll just get in front of this, folks, because I understand that there's been concerns with the RSC model because you're municipalities, and of course with local governance reform, that's complicated things even further. But the RSC model is how we operate, and so we understand that municipalities want things tailored directly to their municipality, but the simple fact is that that's how we're operating at this time as a division, and so that's the framework that we're seized with. We understand it's not perfect, and we understand there's frustrations when you want to find out. Okay, I want to find out what exactly is going on in Utopia. I don't, we get that. Okay.
Yeah, and to your point, like, I mean, often the communities are wondering if they should have a regional police services. This is what we currently have at the moment. It is a regional service for the RSC entirely. All right. So that's how it's divided for every RSC of J Division. All right. The next one, it's the Provincial Police Service Agreement. So RSC 10 fall under that agreement. It's a Provincial Police Service Agreement. I'm no expert in explaining how the contracting works. Like, none of us here at the table is involved with the province and writing those contracts or making agreement with the province or with the RSC or anything like that. But what I want to share here, RSC 10 fall under that umbrella, and that's where the regional police services comes at play. Additional to that, when you are part of the PPSA, the funding model that exists is 30% of the policing cost is actually absorbed by the federal government. So the policing cost for RSC 10 is paid, it's 70% of what it actually, of the bill, it's being covered by the taxpayers, RC 10, right? So now, often when we meet with council and mayors, we have questions, okay, why my bill is so high, why I'm paying that much, things like that. And it's unfortunate, that is not something that I would have the ability to answer. Like, we understand policing come at a cost. It's not a cheap service. I mean, everything mayors, fair to say, like, it's probably the biggest chunk of your budget, it's policing. We know that, but why the government, how the formula work to divide who pays for what and where, that's not something that, as much as I would like to give you more about it, it's not in my wheelhouse at all. So the advantage as well of being part of the PPSA that I call part of the contracting the RCMP, there's a whole lot of work being in the back end, in the background that we don't see and that municipalities do not have to worry about. So for example, like any kind of standards, policies, basically if I need to buy a soft body armor, like which one we need to buy, which one we need to provide to our employees to keep them safe, that comes with big liability. That is some kind of stuff that the municipalities doesn't have to worry about, like the firearm, what kind of firearm we need to be equipped with, taser, long gun, uniform, just to name a few. Like then that brings us to training, information management, technologies, computers, and there's so much stuff in the background that the contract policing side of it takes care of it, and it's not being downloaded on municipalities to make those decisions on our behalf. So when something is not working as it should, the municipality is not the one being held liable if there's a lawsuit. It's actually the federal government that will be managing any kind of lawsuit down the road. And that's equally if there's the lawsuit aspect of it. When the RCMP gets sued for some incident that there's been potentially some wrongdoing, again, the municipalities is not on the hook for that. So it rests with the federal government. So in the next couple of slides, I will also explain what other service we provide to the RC10 that is not physically in RC10, but does contribute at resolving crime that is reported by this RC as well. I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
I think you've framed it up there. I mean, ultimately, we're a service provider, and so the provincial government says to us, we're contracting you to police the communities, and we bring our resources to bear and the structure in place. And there's obviously we're here to talk about the advantages of that, and the big thing is when you're looking at a small police force. What we bring to the table is an economy of scale for our services that we provide. So, in other words, to put it in perspective, St. George has probably one of the finest major crime units in the country because those resources come from division. If there was an armed and barricaded on Main Street that required an armed and barricaded person with hostages that required negotiation over a weekend, you would have a world-class emergency response team come with negotiators, all kinds of support that would probably come with a price tag of about $50,000 for the weekend that St. George does not pay for because it's part of the service we provide. So there's a lot of advantages. Also the indemnification in the sense that if one of our officers, so if you had St. George Police and there was an officer involved shooting and that police officer acted outside the scope of his authority and there was a major lawsuit, the town of St. George and the citizens are paying for that. So the RCMP brings that package and it's all part of that. So it's just kind of having an understanding of how the service it comes to the table, and it's the provincial government that is collecting the money in order to pay for that, and we have a budget from that, and we deal with it accordingly.
Okay, that's fine. I'll read off the screen. So this slide here, I just want to put into perspective how we actually we prioritize calls for service. As you can see on the screen, we speak about priority 1 to 4. So every call for service will get their attention at some point. So it's, again, priority 1, it's a call for service that requires immediate police assistance. Basically, that's the kind of call you will see police car going down the street with lights and siren. They have to go immediately. It cannot wait. Police response is needed immediately. When we score something as priority 2, that means we still need to attend today, right, borderline almost right here, right now, but usually a priority 2 call, it means the incident is no longer evolving. It just recently ended, but we still need to go immediately to assist. It may not require us to go with lights and siren at full speed, but we're coming. A priority 3 file will also be dispatched to the frontline members immediately, but it may not necessitate an immediate response, meaning the officer will be in touch with you certainly during that day, but may not go see you immediately on the same day. It could be tomorrow, things like that. It depends on the nature of the complaint. If there's a need to secure evidence, or if there's something that recently happened, but the officers will make that judgment call. But that's how we divide our priority. Priority 4 What that means is it's a file for service that go to the callback unit. So what they do is they receive your complaint, they assess the situation, they will be in touch with you by phone, and they will see at that stage if there's a need for a police officer to physically go visit you. Normally, anything that falls under priority 4 is because it's often a collision that is not reportable under the provincial law. It could be a file that is reported to the police for insurance purposes where you need a file number, things like that. And in that category, 99+% of the time, it's not something that you were expecting the police to visit you. It's something that just deserves a phone call or anything, no more than that. If for some reason the file went in that category and the employee that reviewed the file feel it should have been priority 3 or 2 for some reason, they will change the category and return it to the front line for a physical follow-up. All right? So again, like we like to compare that to like an emergency room, like with the medical system. Like when people do go to the emergency room, you're basically given a number, and that's how long. Sometimes that number will dictate how long you're going to be waiting in the emergency room. So this is kind of the same principles, but for policing. So again, if you fall as a priority 1, we're coming immediately. Whereas if it falls under 2 and 3, the delayed response can happen. So those files, again, like what we do, we have to keep in mind, like there's a slide coming up in the near future here, like it's going to show you guys the kind of work we deal with. Not every calls for service are criminal in nature. There's a lot of files that are related to provincial laws and legislation, which we are responsible to apply as well. And not often, but there are some files, sometimes just the public doesn't know who to call, so they call the police. That's just, when there's an absence of service, most of the time we're the one getting the phone call and to figure out what we can do to help you guys with whatever is bothering you, right? So even some agencies that works for the province will, when there's some unknown happening in their world, they call us to find out, okay, what can the police do about it? So there's a category of scoring file classification for that as well. So it's not again, like we are well aware that when people call the police, it's not because you're having a good day. So you're calling because you want to see us as soon as you want to see us. We understand that. We may have 4 priorities, but for you, when you call, you're always priority 1, right? And we understand that. But the reality is, how we can serve the people effectively, we need to triage those calls accordingly, so we don't neglect to go to a domestic violence in progress for maybe a theft of chocolate bar that happened 4 days ago, right? So we have to work in that fashion. But rest assured, when you call, we know, like, you're not having a good day, and we know you want us to be at your doorstep in 5 minutes. But the reality of the size and the volume of work we deal with on an annual basis, which you'll see in the near future, it doesn't allow us to do that. I mean, so that's why priority takes place, and that's how fast we need to decide internally on how fast we need to deliver the service as well. All right?
Do you have a search standard for each one of those priorities and response time?
Well, the response time, like, let's make no mistake, we have a big territory to police, right? So RC10, it goes from St. Stephen all the way to the east line. Where's the name of the community that end? Musquash, right? So that's how big of a territory we need to police. So for an example, yes, we may get the priority 1 calls rolling in. Will the officer be nearby the location immediately? Not necessarily, but that's going to dictate how long it's going to take for us to get there. You'll see in one of the slides, like RC10 on the mainland has 1, 2, 3, and 4 working, we call home unit, where the members are using as their workstation. So strategically, those workspaces are existing to share the service delivery within RC10, right? So sometimes the closer you are to the infrastructure, if the officer happen to be working at that unit, the response time will be faster. But the reality of policing is we are often on the road. We have to go meet people, take statements, because it's not like the people call the police and they all come see us. Often we are the one going to them, and that entail a lot of traveling. And you know, some emergency service at time, what happen is they could be statically waiting for a call to come in, and then they deploy. Whereas us, we can be anywhere in that RC at time of a call coming in, if that makes sense. All right?
I can give you a little example just to speak about how we can bring, based on a priority one call, something, thanks Scott, something that is critical and immediate, like a priority one dispatch, we can bring critical mass to bear. We had an armed robbery in this community, a week ago. We had officers from St. Andrews, we had officers from St. Stephen, we had officers from this community here that are stationed around the RSC, and we brought those resources to bear, and we were funneling more resources in when we apprehended the suspect about a half hour after the offense. So, like Inspector Sonia was saying, a lot of it is based upon the immediacy, the public safety risk, and the availability of the resources at the time. But with the big stuff, we do pretty good.
You know, and just to add to that, like, I mean, sometimes we do leverage other RSC to assist. Like, there was an incident like just recently that happened in RC10, and we had resource from headquarters with like police dog services, the drone operator. We were even looking for the helicopter, things like that. So those are employees that are not physically in RC10, but when something big does happen, we call them to come in and to assist as need be. All right.
Give me, and thank you, by the way, for your services. Très c'est tout bon. Can you give me the fine line between civil and criminal?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer just like that. The criminal code has over 800 different sections. A lot of them will guide procedures that the police are allowed to follow, but there's a big chunk of that book that is all criminal matters that can be subject to an investigation. In the absence of a criminal code, if the situation you're reporting does not fall in that big book, it is very possible it could be civil in nature. But it does not mean that the situation you're reporting is in that big, thick book that you can still proceed civilly as well. If that makes sense.
So you're telling me, sir, that when you guys want out of it, say, sorry, it's not a police matter. Click. It's happened to me.
Okay, you know, I'll go back to what Monsieur Leclerc was saying. Like, if there was a file that you believe that was criminal in nature, and the service delivered was not to your expectation, that's where I believe you would go to the detachment near your location and meet with one of the supervisors to report what was going on, right? So.
Okay, like last week now, I went to the RCMP.
Sir, what I'll do, as Inspector Sonia was saying, I'm in charge of operations locally. What I'll do is at the end of the night here, I will get your name, I will get your phone number, and either myself or one of my supervisors will contact you tomorrow. How's that?
I did that last Tuesday, and here it is, what, Wednesday today?
Okay,
That's last Tuesday.
all right. Well, I wasn't aware of it up until now. Now that I'm aware of it, I'm telling you in front of my bosses here, I will call you back, or I will ensure one of my supervisors does that. And that's.
And if you want to come to my house, I'm right on the way to Blacks Harbor. You can't
Okay.
miss it. There's a big sign.
Yeah, I'll get your information and kind of an overview, but we'll sort of treat that as a one of, and I'll take that offline afterwards, and I'm making that commitment to you. I'll make sure.
We
that-
have another problem here in this community. It's called fraud.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we want to keep on track with our
Okay,
presentation.
no problem, guys. Let her go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, so the next slide, it speaks about specialized policing services, okay? So those are the one you normally don't see. Really, these are the one doing a lot of heavy lifting for specialized crime that's being reported to us. So that's just some examples. There's a lot more than the list that you see there, but just to start with, like major crime, it's the specialized unit that will come into RC10 in the event of a murder or a suspicious death. So they have the expertise to ensure that the investigation, in other words, is done to the expectation of the justice system, right? The more complex the file, the more specialized skill set that you need to be as an investigator. So we have a team ready to deploy at any time there's a serious crime of that nature that happened, that they will just come into RC10, do their work, do the investigation, and bring justice to the situation. The second one that you can see on the right is the police dog services. Again, that we have That is a unit that is not physically here in RC10, but at the minute we need them, it's a phone call away, and they're coming here to assist us. Again, I think recently he was here and tracking a high priority offender out of Utopia, if I remember correctly.
Yes, that's right.
And he's the one that located the suspect that was hiding from police in the wood, I believe, or near.
Yeah, he was just actually adjacent to the property, but the presence, a lot of times with a police dog, just the sheer presence of that resource, and in that case, I mean, we had other intervention options there too, like a 40 millimeter less lethal launcher. Sometimes when we have those resources present, the presence of those resources will de-escalate. The person simply decides to comply because they want to ensure that they're taken into custody and handcuffed quickly, and they don't want to meet those levels of force.
You know, like,
To put it straightforward.
yeah, no, that's the thing. Like the dog that we have, it's a beautiful dog, but he has a job to do. You know, so he's trained to track, search, things like that, right? So it's a very effective tool. To be honest, like if someone is missing in the wood and the dog rolls in, or if we're searching, tracking for a suspect, the chance the dog's going to find you is very high. And I know one thing: you cannot outrun that dog. So, but it's a valuable asset that we have available. The next one, it's called Tactical Service Group. It's TSG. That's what when there's a major event, like a demonstration, people protesting, things like that, or we often also use them, the tactical troop, to conduct mass search. Like if there's a large area that needs to be searched for a criminal matter, they also have the expertise to do like a grid map and search effectively in order to find the evidence we're looking for. So it's how many members do we have on that team, Scott?
Between 65 and 70 around the division.
Yeah, so it's a very large unit that can quickly deploy when need be as well. The next one, Forensic Identification Services. That's what I like to call what you see in CSI. But it's not as fast as you see on CSI. So, you know, it's not like they taste the blood and they can tell who it is. Like, so there's an actual science behind that, where there's process and procedures in place. Yes, they will find the fingerprints, but it's going to have to go to a lab and to be compared in a database and to eventually say, yeah, it's John Doe, right? So they have the expertise, but it's not as fast as you see on TV. But they can connect a lot of DNA evidence and, you know, footprint impression, things like that, you know. So it's quite sophisticated what they can do. So for example, like they can match tire tracks to a scene or things like that. So it's quite impressive. The emergency response team, that's what we often see on TV as the SWAT team. That's the big guy with the big guns, right? But it's the tactical, it's the emergency response team is, as Andy mentioned, we're known as world-class caliber. Like the emergency response team of the RCMP is not only probably I would say the best in the country, no doubt in my mind. There's a lot of policing agencies that will consult the RCMP to actually find best practice, you know. The Digital Forensic Services, so DFS, what that means, as we all know, since the 90s, internet is a thing, people are now connecting online, there's more and more technologies out there, tablet, phone, just to name a few. Every time we seize those things, we need the expertise to extract the data we're looking for. So once again, we need people with the right skill set to search those devices in order to have admissible evidence to connect to the criminal that used the device. So again, lots of hard work that goes in the back scene that it's not seen, but that unit is getting busier and busier because crime happening online is just a reality that we have now. So the underwater response team, the URT, that's what we call internally the dive team. So if there's someone missing, there's a body of water nearby, that's the unit that's going to come in and that's going to search the water, the river, the lake, whichever area of water we needs to be searched. So we have a specialized unit as well in that field. The last one on that list is the crisis negotiation team, which is often being deployed with the emergency response team. So often that could be something we're going to be leveraging in this incident of an armed and barricaded person. So again, as seen on TV, we just boot the door in, we extract people out, but that's not how it works. Again, we have to negotiate people out safely because the safety of the person committing the crime is equally as important. So that's where they use their expertise to talk people out of the house. In some situation, I know like recently in Moncton, there was someone that was standing on an overpass, threatening to commit suicide, jumping off the highway, something like that. Once again, that's the kind of unit that we did leverage to say, hey, talk to that person, hope, and to get the person off the bridge, and which worked successfully. So again, this is only a glimpse of what we have. There's a lot more that we are not on that list, but that's just to give you a understanding that yes, as Andy said, there's not an officer in every corner of the street, but the complexity of policing is something that we had to adjust. We adjust with society, we adjust with how the crime has evolved, and all that specialized units that I just presented are now needed in order to be an effective police service department. So.
And we're obliged to evolve. And as the provincial police force, we have to have these services available. And where do the police officers that are occupying those roles come from? Well, back in the day, those police officers were on the front line, but as we become more specialized, those frontline police officers are occupying these units. And so those are police officers you don't see, but you have to understand they're standing behind the police officers that you do see. But we're constantly, as a district commander, I'm constantly in negotiations with somebody in tech crime that wants one of my frontline officers, and I'm like, no, because, and when I say the frontline police officer, it's the boots on the ground, it's the ones that are responding to your B&E in progress, your domestic files. It's my job to make sure we have that capacity in place, because presence and engagement is important. So it's a balance. So yes, those are amazing services, but I do understand they impact our frontline because those officers have to come from somewhere. And the smaller agencies in the province, and we have, and I'm only speaking to the different policing options because it's a hot topic in the media right now, and so. And I encourage communities to, as a taxpayer, I encourage communities to look at best options. That's what I expect. But we have incredible municipal agencies across the province that we work very, very closely with. But again, I come back to where we are the biggest show in the province with over 800 police officers. And so we can provide these services on an economy of scale to everybody that we police. So.
Yeah, and again, yes, I speak positively about the RCMP, not just because I work for them, but I'm a firm believer, when you are served by the RCMP, it's not just an RSC approach. Like, we have the provincial expertise, we have a national expertise, and not only that, we have an international expertise that's backing what we do. So I know sometimes there's frustration, but ultimately what we have available to deliver and solve certain specific and certain crime, it's quite amazing what we can leverage and what we can use, and the people that are available to make this, to serve justice, right? The next one is to the local government's reform. We are part of it too. We are adjusting as we go as well, but what needs to be understood is the local government's reform is not impacting the RSC as a whole. So the regional policing model is not being impacted by the LGR. So that's a question that's often coming up to our meetings, is people are wondering how that impact policing service delivery. Technically, the LGR it does impact directly the municipality, how the municipality is being managed, things like that. But outside that, the policing model rests with the RSC, so that's not changing. Yeah, just looking to see if I forgot anything on that slide, but I think that's really what this slide is about. So if there was any concern that it's going to drastically change things, really, it's just not. So that's okay. Yes. So this one here, I don't have. Yes. Okay. So this is just to show the nature, the volume of file that we manage quarterly. So on this slide, it's just to show you like quarter number 1, that means for April, May, and June only. So for 3 months worth of work, RSC-10 had just over 2,076 files for service. That's only for 3 months, all right? That's how many times the officers in RC-10 had to respond with for different files. What you see on the bottom, you can see what I call our home unit. So St. Stephen, St. George, St. Andrews, McAdam, and Grand Manan. So that 2,076, it's divided by our home unit. So you can see on the St. Stephen side, that's where most of the file are being generated from. Then you see St. George, followed by Grand Manan, St. Andrews, and so on. So each home unit for the RCMP, we call that area of responsibility. So we have members assigned to those locations, but their responsibility, it's still RSC-10. But the RSC-10 RCMP members are deployed at those locations in order to serve RSC-10 more effectively. So instead of having one building in the middle with all members reporting at the same place, that's how it's divided in this RSC. And that's how it was implemented in 2012. So when the PPSA was rolled out at the provincial level and adapting to the Regional Service Commission concept as well. So it's about it's already a decade old concept that's been in place in all RC of New Brunswick. So that's just to give you again how much work is being done, the volume of work. The next slide is it's the same thing, but it's at the annual level. So in 2022, RSC-10 responds to just over 8,400 files, and in the year before was 8,000 and just over 500 files. So that's the volume of file yearly we manage in RSC-10 only, all right? So.
Nice. And again, guys, I know it's a little bit of confusion here, and I want to apologize because sometimes the RCMP, we do things, and I kind of go, why do we do that? And if I'm asking it, I can only imagine the people in the room. So we divide our policing into 4 quarters. Q1 starts in April, May, June, July. So and then we are comparing those statistics from last year. So essentially what you're seeing here is that there hasn't been a crazy increase in files for service. They stay about the same. But what you will see, and I know that like I've been getting the message out, you see something, call the police. Yep. That's going to impact our stats because you're going to see those occurrences go up because people are going to be more, they're going to be reporting more. And so when we look at our entire year, it basically goes from April 1st to March 31st. So it's a little bit confusing, but it's a federal government thing for that's as simple as I can put it. That's how we work in our fiscal year. Sorry, Martin.
It's all good. It's
been confusing me for 33 years, so I can imagine this room. It's probably got a few people's head shaking.
Oh, there's a question there.
You're giving the numbers. I was just wondering if, and I can't see from here, if the types of incidents have changed. So 8,400 to 8,500, 85 to whatever, that's roughly about the same. I get that year over year. But have the types of incidents changed?
Yeah, the type of incidents from year after year is relatively the same. Like most of the top 10, the number 1 to 5-ish are usually non-criminal in nature. It could be traffic complaints. It can be mental health act. Just stand by. I have the slide right in front of me. Yeah, people being suspicious people. That's a common call. People see something happening. It could be a vehicle. It can be a person. It can be a behavior. Whatever that is, but doesn't appear to be too normal. They report it to us. Things like that. So the category sometimes, like the number 6 may become number 7, and the next year 7 become 5, but a drastic change, not so much.
And we also see trends.
Yeah.
So for instance, during COVID, mental health calls for service were on the increase. We saw that when there was a scourge of catalytic converter thefts, that trend. Up in the Western Valley, we were getting hammered with attacks on those, on the community mailboxes, which weren't scored as a theft, they were scored as a mischief, a damage to property. So you'll get those trends. But the actual calls for service kind of remain the same. So we provide the RSC with a quarterly report that speaks to, you know, and it's the property crime offense. Like when there's a homicide in a small community, it's like, that's data that everybody knows. But what really interests people are the property crime stats, like the theft under 5,000. You know, if the number of break-ins spike, that's indicative that you've got a priority offender in your area that's doing crime. And so those are the kinds of things that the public want to see. So we provide those to the RSC 10 with the various areas at the end of every quarter.
Have you seen a shift? I'm just kind of tickling out the numbers here. A shift in maybe the total for the area has remained the same, but we'll say some of the incidents have stayed the same, but have kind of shifted to different areas within that. It's moved from St. Stephen is the central spot, but now some of it maybe is moving towards St. George. So I'm just, but the number's about the same.
You know, like recently, I just received an analytical report, which indicating that the overall property crime in West District has reduced, but certain property crime has increased. So, for example, like RC11, property crime in general has decreased, but theft of motor vehicle has increased. So the totality of the number, the total amount of filed is lower, but the specific crime, which is stealing motor vehicle, is higher in that group. Now, in RC10, what was noticed is, yes, the crime has not increased, but certain type has increased. If that makes sense, for example, break and enter. We've noticed there was an increase in break and enter. I would tie that up to a lot of the recent arrests that took place on priority offender. Are most of the time when there's a spike of a crime type, often the same people are responsible for it. Once they are behind bar, it goes down again, right? So that's a trend that we connect those dots. Obviously, those crime were on the rise. The people that were responsible for it were identified, being arrested, and now it's going back down. Can a crime shift from left to right? The answer is yes. Often, if little Johnny moved from location A to location B, crime will follow little Johnny. All right. So, you know, so that probably answer your question, right?
Thank you very much.
All right.
One of the things I was going to add too, and not to get into too many specifics, but some of these recent offenders that have gone to jail and actually are sitting in jail tonight while we're here in this room, I can tell you with great confidence, they're not just operating in one specific part of RSC 10. These people are operating right across RSC 10, and you know, within their own networks, they're associating with other criminals that are doing the same thing. So by taking out these individuals from the community, incarcerating them or bringing them before the courts, we're able to, even though the arrest might take place in one community, have an impact on crime right across the entire RSC.
Yep. So criminal has no boundaries. At the end of the day, they don't have to respect jurisdiction. If they have to move around to do what they have to do, they'll just do it. So that's sometimes, that's the reality is we may arrest someone in a specific community, but that has an impact on the whole RC. All right?
With these, I guess, 8,500 or so occurrences,
Yeah.
are these ones that have been responded to by the RCMP, or are some of these just calls that come in but you don't necessarily respond?
No, so all of those files were from 1 to 4. They were all prioritized from 1 to 4. So there's a percentage, to answer your question, that would have been treated by the callback unit before coming back to us if need be. So I can't remember the exact number of that 8,000 something. Let's say it's probably shy of 1,000 or less. Those files went to callback unit, the triage, and again, what we have to keep in mind, what goes there, it was designed to go there anyway. So it was not something that was reported by the public with the expectation for the RCMP to actually present themselves. So it could be, as I said earlier, it could be a non-reportable collision, it could be reporting to the police because you need a file number for insurance purpose, things like that. So, yeah.
The reason I asked, several years ago, I have a home security system.
Okay,
And a couple of years ago, I had my alarm go off. I set my alarm, I wasn't home.
yeah,
My alarm company called me to say, you know, there's an alarm going off. We've called the RCMP. But what the alarm company told me is the RCMP told them they don't respond for one alarm. Now, as a volunteer firefighter, or 30 plus year volunteer firefighter, every time an ADT alarm went off, be it Christmas morning, be it in the middle of the afternoon, be it 3 o'clock in the morning, we went. And most of the time, it was burnt toast. So why would they not respond? Why would the RCMP not respond for an alarm?
there's a protocol of that, on that. It's not every alarm. Doesn't mean there's one zone that we're not attending. It depends on the nature of the zone. There are factors that are being considered before choosing to dispatch or not. It's not an automatic, we're not going. Let's put it this way. Multiple zone, it's an automatic dispatch. When it's a one zone, they assess the situation based on the nature of the zone, the nature of the location, if the owner is nearby, things like that. There are things that are factored in before. It's not an immediate no. So to answer to your situation, I would need to know more, obviously.
Oh, 100%. I'm not saying
Yeah.
you don't know my situation. I understand that, right?
Yeah, but it's not a clear cut, we go to every single alarm. That's just a.
Well, as a volunteer firefighter, we went to every single alarm.
Okay.
And this is where I'm having an issue with you not responding to my, don't get me wrong, there was nothing wrong in this particular case, right? But you didn't know that.
Yeah.
So with single hit alarms, I can tell you from a couple different vantage points. I have an alarm system in my home. I have 2 different video systems on my own home. One pushes to my phone. I take my own personal home security quite seriously. I've actually instructed my alarm company to not dispatch the police for a single hit alarm, because I can tell you, having done this job for 22 years, I've worked in a specialized property crime unit, single hit alarms are very rarely indicative of an intrusion. I'll give you an example. I'm going back, sitting in the bullpen in Leduc, Alberta. We get an alarm dispatch. Front door entry, front hallway entry, stairway motion, bedroom motion. I look at my partner, I said, let's roll. This is a B&E in progress. Because that pattern, like Inspector Saulnier was saying, is indicative of an intrusion. I mean, I'm not going to get up here and debate, but do I think it's a good use of police resources to respond to every single hit alarm out there? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that when we have weather events, our single hit alarms go up quite a bit. We have to assess those calls based on risk. Police resources are finite resources. I mean, I'm not going to say how many officers are working at any given time, but if you've got various things on the go within your RSC, do you want your police driving out and checking single hit alarms? I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's probably not the best use of police resources. But again, everything's based on its own merits.
Well, what you did do was save me $25 a month for monitoring, because there's no point anymore. I just monitor on my own now.
Well, I mean, in the event that you had multiple hit alarms and your alarm company dispatched that to the police and said, we've got 3 different hits, they've called you as the homeowner because your alarm company would have a contact list and you say there should be nobody in the house. That's a different thing than a single hit alarm on a night where we have high winds, right?
Well, I guess in my situation, I have one door alarm, because it's a basic system, one door alarm, and I think a motion detector in a different room. So that would be your one hit alarm, right? Because, you know, the door would go off, or maybe someone opened the door, the wind might have blew the door open, I don't know. And like I say, in this particular case, there wasn't a major situation.
I know in some jurisdictions, I mean, I'll throw the certain large municipalities in Alberta, there's actually a fine to the homeowner for false alarms. We don't have that here in New Brunswick, but I'm just saying that different municipalities manage alarms in different ways. Some of the larger municipal police services in Western Canada, and the municipalities have alarm bylaws because it just takes such a large draw of your policing resource to respond to alarms that a lot of the time are not criminal in nature. Now, if you find that there is a break and enter in progress, or if you've been broken into, that's a criminal event. We'll always investigate that, right?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
No, it's all right. Okay. This one, we partially covered it by answering some of your questions. So the challenge of rural policing. Rural policing comes with large territory. That's no secret. That's how it is across New Brunswick. We don't have a small sandbox. It's really like, as I described earlier, RC10 is St. Stephen to Musquash up to past Macadam, Harvey. It's a very big territory. So that's one of the challenges. It's acknowledged. It's not something we know that exists. Like, and that's a reality. Low population. Okay, the cop to pop. I don't know if you paid attention to the news in the last couple of weeks and months. There's a budget increase for the policing services, which will translate into more boots on the ground. The study is ongoing right now, and no decision has been made. But the intention for the government is to reduce area where the cop to population is very low. So things like that. Cell phone coverage, radio coverage. Well, radio for the RCMP is relatively very positive. It's working well. Cell phone, as we all know, that's depend where you are, right? So sometimes that can be a challenge for people reporting things to the police. If they only have a cell phone on their person and there's no reception, it can be a barrier for the citizen to report something that happened in a timely manner. The travel distance, court is in St. John. Some specialized service like hospitals that we need to bring client to could be as well as far as that location as well. There's some area, some RC has less support services. I know like Charlotte County, to my belief, does not have like a mobile crisis unit as an example. So those are units that exist in other area of the province whereas instead of seeing the police transporting people to be assessed by the mental health nurse or the doctor, the mobile crisis unit responds with the RCMP to chat with the person at the home and to come to a conclusion if the person needs to go see a doctor or not. So that's a lot of, those kind of service does alleviate a lot of pressure from police services when they're non-existent. Like, for example, like in this area, I know like the police has to do it, right? And has to transport to the hospital, has to be sitting in the emergency room for maybe 2 or 3 hours sometime, right? So that's the kind of challenge that rural policing comes with. Often when we are being compared to another police force, we're often being compared to a municipal police force, and it's not an apple with an apple. So the reality of what we do here in this province, we police the whole rural of the province, and there's 9 other police force in New Brunswick that serve those much smaller territory and municipalities. Once again, like I know we're often being compared to, well, they have their own service, but it's not the same reality. So that's just what it is. The RCMP advantage. All right, so we've covered a lot, I believe, already. I mean, like all the specialized service that is available to the RC, all RC of the province. I spoke about the liability side of it earlier as well, when there are wrongdoing from the police or if there's a lawsuit and that kind of stuff. It's not all being covered by us, the government, not the municipalities. We do have a public complaint commission process. When people do file a complaint against the action of a police officer, we have a process well established at the national level to process those complaints, but also to investigate that within New Brunswick as well. Once again, I spoke about that earlier. Any kind of equipment, police car, intervention tools, uniform, any kind of policing equipment in general, it's all taken care of as well by the RCMP. So I'm kind of repeating some of the stuff that I've shared with you guys earlier. This slide here, I'll let Chris to speak about this. I know we are being criticized for sometimes a perception of a lack of police action, and often it's sometimes the lack of communication from our end. What we have here is just to showcase some of the good results that we brought forward to your attention just last month, and we have a lot more than that this month as well, but that's the kind of results we've been producing month after month. Like, this is not an exception to the rule here, But we decide, I know recently having discussion about, okay, we hear you guys not feeling that there's maybe not enough done. We decide to be more proactive and share some of the good work that's been done. So if you want to,
Absolutely. I gotta keep remembering to use this microphone. Everybody in the room has social media. Most people do. Do you guys follow the RCMP in New Brunswick on Facebook or Twitter? Yeah, please do. A lot of these, actually, all these media releases are shared right on our social media. So we have a few of them here. Kaylee, if you're able to click on them, the top one here, we've got. Yeah, they're all different hyperlinks, and this isn't exhaustive. Like, we have several others, but we've picked a few off here, and all the hyperlinks aren't working. So yeah, you'll see here the top one here on June 8th. 32-year-old man arrested following the recovery of stolen property in St. Stephen. We've got 34-year-old man charged in connection with a break-and-enter and theft in St. Stephen. Inspector Sonia was talking about the forensic identification section. That section, that specialized police resource, was actually able to link the suspect to that crime. And lo and behold, although the crime took place in St. Stephen, that suspect is somebody that is quite well known to this part of the RSC. So just illustrates that these people are operating right across the area. We have here 4 youths arrested on the 15th for a break and enter. It says in St. George, it's actually just east of town here, but in the area as well. We've got a search warrant here. This file is still under investigation from the 25th, where we have recovery of stolen property following the execution of a search warrant. We actually executed a criminal code search warrant on Deer Island earlier that week as well for stolen property. So we're working on those investigations and trying to tie property from those investigations to some outstanding theft files, or some thefts that haven't even been reported. We're able to recover the property. July 27th, 24-year-old male repeat offender arrested and charged. That was in relation to an incident that happened north of St. Stephen. We were able to link that person to several other occurrences, not just in RSC 10, but in the entire south and central part of the province. So this person truly was moving between different jurisdictions and committing their offenses, and they were taken into custody right here in RSC 10. And then just recently, the armed robbery we spoke about earlier here in town, where we arrested and charged a 19-year-old male with committing that offense. So these are, again, not exhaustive, but just some examples of what we're doing in your community here in the area to keep you guys safe and to hold people accountable for breaking the law.
And a big piece of that success is you. You know, when we're working, you know, and we're aligned with the community, that information comes to us, we're able to act on it. When you come forward as witnesses, when you know, we have businesses that have great, like, I mean, in this day and age, you know, as far as crystal clear video and how important recognition evidence is in the courts, it's a game changer for us. So these successes aren't, it's not just us, it's actually the collaboration that we get from the community. And I know the message has been report. You know, you're out there, you're our eyes and ears, as far as seeing like pre-crime behavior when people are in your neighborhoods, and we get that heads up. I would rather come and you know, catch somebody in progress than after they did the crime. So we really need the community to have their eyes open for us and be reporting, and that is so important.
Mm-hmm. I think you'll find, I'm sorry, yeah, I think you'll find, I've been talking to people through town, people I work with, and it's not necessarily the RCMP not doing their job, it's the the perception that, you know, these people are arrested, they go to court for the day, they're let out that day or the next day, and then they reoffend, right? And this is where I think a lot of the frustration's coming from, not necessarily your side of it, but the court side of it.
Yeah, and I'm not here to throw the judiciary under the bus, that's not what I'm gonna do. But they have a tough job, and you know, and you know, they have to manage capacity, and I'll you know, the bulk of what impacts the community is property crime. Like that's, I mean, you know, if somebody's the victim of a robbery where they're assaulted and something's taken, I mean, it's horrible. But those, thankfully, those types of incidents are far, they're far less than, you know, having your propane tank stolen or your garage broken into. But what the judiciary is, when we put somebody before the court, they're less likely to hold somebody that's not a violent offender. But that doesn't mean we just throw our arms up in the air. No, we just keep putting them before the courts. And then we keep building our case to get them remanded so they can't get back out, because, you know, yeah, they're out, okay, we catch them, they go back in, and then it puts more pressure on the judiciary to say, okay, this guy's been before us so many times now, we're holding him. So we got to have that kind of, we maintain that, no, we just keep going mentality.
Yeah, I mean, the first offense, okay, let them go.
Yeah.
But when they get caught again, they've breached, you know, conditions of leaving the courts.
Yeah.
So to me, lock them
You'll
up.
see with some of these recent releases we've done, and without divulging names, there's been subjects that we have arrested the first time, brought them before the courts, operating within Canadian law, they've been released, they've reoffended, we've been right there, we've rearrested that person, brought them back, and as Superintendent Leclerc said, after the judge sees the person the second and third time, they're in a situation where there's more of an onus placed on them to speak to why they should be released in pretrial custody, and oftentimes they're not able to satisfy that requirement. So I guess the word we'll use, and we're, from a crime reduction standpoint, we're disrupting that individual. It's probably not as expedient as a victim of crime would like to see, but we certainly will put that commitment to you as your police force of jurisdiction, that as long as that person is causing harm in the community, we will be there to bring that person before the courts. Well, we'll investigate the crime, and when we are able to bring that person before the courts, we will. And eventually, if the person continues in that pattern, they will stay in custody. That's the way it works.
But since when would an armed robbery, a person be released that day or the next day? Come on.
Well, a lot of it, without speaking about any specific examples, and without going into a huge discussion on Canadian law, there are certain principles that are codified in law that the judge needs to consider when they speak to release. The person's history, there's a variety of circumstances, whether the identity of the person has been satisfied, whether there's a belief they're going to repeat the offense based upon the situation. Do we believe that person's going to show up in court? The public interest is satisfied and they're released on release conditions. By the way that the law operates, a lot of the time the court is required to release that person. The threshold is high. And obviously, I mean, whatever my personal feelings or your personal feelings are on that issue, that is the law in which police forces across Canada have to operate.
Yeah, the laws may be satisfied, but the public interest, if you ask the public, they're not satisfied.
I
So there's a
understand what
difference
you're saying.
between
I
what
do-
your public interest and my public interest, I guess.
No, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to dismiss the concern. I'm just saying that that's the reality in which we're operating. It's not something that anybody at this table has any control over. These are
No, and that's the first thing I said. It's
Right.
not blaming the RCMP, it's just because it's not your fault that they're released,
yeah,
right? But
No,
this
I
is
get
where
it.
a lot of people are getting frustrated. It's
yeah.
out of your control, I
No,
understand.
but I think to Chris' point, like we, as much as it can be frustrating, we're not giving up on those process, you know, like.
Oh,
we have-
no one said you were.
No,
No.
I know you're not saying
No.
that at all, but I just wanted to reassure, like, are we equally frustrated at the time? Yes, it will happen. Don't get me
Oh,
wrong.
I'm sure
like,
you're
I mean,
frustrated too.
But I can assure you, like, that doesn't stop us from keep on trying. As I told Chris this week, like, it's like a boxing match. You don't always get knocked out in the first round, but eventually it's going to happen, right? So it could take one arrest, two arrests. We may do all 9 rounds, but eventually you'll be staying in custody, right?
So why back in the day, I can remember, when you got arrested, you were thrown in jail until your court date was due. And if you were found guilty, you were still thrown in jail again. What happened?
You know what? Again, that's a question for.
Seriously though, what happened though? Like what happened to our justice system? You know, we used to,
You know, and these are great questions, and so, folks, what I'd like to do is I'd like to we'll have time for these, and poor Martin's getting dragged off his presentation.
Ah.
So we'll finish
all
our
good.
presentation.
They're all good
We'll have-
questions.
We'll be able to do the Q&A. So we'll run through these last few slides, and those can be a topic of discussion when we do our Q&A.
This one.
I mean, well, first and foremost, thank you for your service, and I don't think the issue is with the officers in general, it's within the system. But, you know, you have 6 great examples that reflect this specific presentation you're doing, but what are the actual examples of, you know, the district, and what's the percentage of that aren't getting solved, and the stuff that's repeat offenders and that's continued? And, I mean, you have 6 great examples of ones that you nailed, but
Thanks, Derek. Well, I mean, that's a very difficult thing to measure. Earlier, we were hearing about crime that isn't reported. A lot of the time, things are happening in the community, and people aren't calling the police for various reasons. I won't go too far off topic, but sitting in my living room on Saturday night, I got a couple different things that were sent to me by text message on my personal phone from people I know in the community. I try not to do business on my own time, but it happens in a small town. And, you know, there are things that are being shared on social media, property crime, cases of people losing things that are important to them and their family. I read it and I'm like, wow, this is pretty troubling. You know, like, I got kids. If somebody took something that was important to my kids, I'd be a little bit upset. Well, I went and I checked on these files when I got into the office and weren't able to find any reports of these things. But they're all over social media. So there's a perception and a reality that there's crime taking place, but that crime is not being reported. One time I talked to a guy and he said, well, I put it on my Facebook. And I said, well, it's great that you did that, but it's no disrespect. I don't go on your Facebook. I don't look to see what you're up to. It's really nice that you let your neighbors know that something's being taken from your camp or from your property. What you got to do is you got to call us. And I'm not saying we're going to solve it every time. The doctor doesn't cure everybody's illness.
without dragging off of your presentation.
Sir.
Without dragging off your presentation, though, like, I encourage anyone that hasn't to go through the painful process of calling that 1-800 number. And when you've just had your stuff stolen or broken into, and spend 8, 9, 10 minutes listening to the elevator music, and maybe you do get a call back the next day. And that's when it becomes frustrating, and I think that's when people get frustrated and then in turn don't bother. Like, I can speak to several ones where it's not worth spending 10, 15 minutes to report something that's probably worth $300 to up your numbers so you have the stats to making a presentation.
You know what, I hear that, and I get it, and I understand the frustration, but it's the framework that we work within, and you know, ultimately, when you're calling, you don't. We're no different than any other public service in the sense that we have capacity issues. So when you call 911, we're coming. If it's a file that it's not time sensitive and you know, it's farther down the chain, you're going to be dealing with delays. I know it's frustrating, unfortunately, and it will impact people's interest in actually staying on and making the call. So you've identified an issue. I totally get it. I wish I had an endless group of people that could be on the phone and answer right away. But we you know, break your foot and go to emerge. You know, it's not a 10-minute wait. It's like there, and I'm not throwing the health authority under the bus. It's just that public services, there's finite resource in order to attend an individual, and I know any delay creates frustration. And when you call the police, you're in a crisis and you're not happy, and that's only aggravating it when you have to wait.
Yeah, so I've attended 3 of these in 2014 as a counselor, in 2019 as a counselor, and again tonight. Coincidentally, they're all 5 years apart. Whenever there's a major discussion about leaving the RCMP forces, when these meetings tend to happen. But in all, well, I'll say 3 now, it was brought up. Before, you used to call 11:30 during the working hours. You got someone at the office, you could report, Joe Schmo stole my gas tank off my boat, whatever. The report was made, that was it. But now you have to go through this 1-800 to report it, and that, anyway, well, you finish your presentation, but that is a huge pile of frustration
You raise a great
for
point,
anyone that has to
and you know
deal
what, this is not the first time I've heard it. And so I wish we could do better when it comes to being able to attend to those individuals in a more timely fashion. I can tell you that our commanding officer gets the stats from our OCC at our senior management meetings, and she holds feet to the fire with, okay, why did that, how come so-and-so had to wait? So those questions are being asked, sir, and believe me, I understand how they contribute to frustration. Okay, let's continue.
Yep. Okay. This one here is just to share some of the online tool that you can access to see some crime trend happening in your area. So on the RCMP public website under the province of New Brunswick, daily we publish our daily occurrence report. On that report, what you will see is the volume of calls that was received across New Brunswick, but also the kind of files that we had to respond to. Once again, the daily occurrence report, it's not overly detailed in the sense it's just going to give you really, once again, an overview of what happened in New Brunswick yesterday. In a nutshell, that's what you're going to see in there. The New Brunswick occurrence map and the occurrence graph, that is more of a techie side of it, where you can click in the location of interest. You can click in St. George, for an example, is going to tell you in 2022 versus 2023 how many crimes were reported in that area and the kind of crime type in a specific order. So that's what is available just for your situational awareness of what is happening in your neighborhood type of thing. So I often encourage mayors, council, and members to leverage those tools to educate as well themselves of what's going on in their RSC or their neighborhood. The Department of Public Safety, the Government of New Brunswick website also has some reporting crime tools that is available. Once again, the goal of that is just to bring some awareness of what's going on in your neighborhood. The dashboard is very similar to what we have with the RCMP, but it's a lot more detailed. Like if you pay that website a visit and you click on that public safety crime dashboard, you can check for the month, the year, things like that, and you can select a location, and it's going to give you a bunch of data of what is going on in a given area of the new province of New Brunswick. So in a nutshell, that's really for your awareness. If you are curious to see, you go on those websites, it's available. This one here, it's the online crime reporting tool. That was designed early last year, if I'm not mistaken. And it is meant to be giving the public the ability to go online and report a non-violent crime to the RCMP. So, to your example, for example, if there is you're calling in, you're waiting on the line, it's not something that recently happened, and you don't want to be waiting 10 minutes, something like that, you can go on that website on the RCMP. It's a tool that's available on the public website. There's a tab, you click online reporting, it's going to open the page, and you just follow the instruction for reporting the incident to the RCMP. All right, so that's another way to free up some telephone time if you want to use that tool to report something that is not urgent in nature. Obviously, if there's an emergency, that tool is not meant to be used. And anyway, if it's a crime against a person, that tool would not allow you to report it because they would expect you to dial 911, right? So, but again, it's a good way of reporting crime to the RCMP without having to wait online. So that will file a report. It's going to come to us. A follow-up will be done once we get when the file will be received and a follow-up is done. Again, statistically speaking, we look at the numbers of how many times that tool was used last year. It was not very high. I know we did some media. We did publicize the tool, but it's not used enough to my belief. I think there's a lot of good that comes with that thing, and I think the general public needs to take advantage of reporting those things online. So, okay, so this one is just, again, we said it before, it's very important that you report situation happening in your community. Once again, as Andy said, like you are the partners that we need to solve crimes. Sometimes people feel like they don't want to bother the police or for whatever the reason, but you may have the missing piece of the puzzle for us to solve what we're trying to solve at time. When it's an emergency, obviously, I think that's everybody understand that. You dial 911. As Monsieur Leclerc mentioned, a 911 call bypass every phone line and it's answered. I think our numbers is 911 is answered all under 10 seconds. I think the record time for our dispatcher is about 2-point-something seconds. There's a bit of a competition, but that's how fast it gets answered. Really, like it's a priority. A 911 is not on standby for 5 minutes or something like that. The 1-800 numbers, when things goes well, the majority it's under 5 minutes, but there's a percentage, it's above, and we are aware of that. When that does happen, people are not satisfied. We understand that. Our management team that does manage that unit is well aware. They're all actively looking at solution to expedite every process that they have. It's not being ignored, as Mr. Leclerc said here. Like it has been acknowledged by our management and constantly looking at way at improving. So we don't want people to drop their call or not being served as fast as they would like to be, things like that. So the 1-800 number is there for that. And again, the online reporting tool. Once again, I know every time we do to a council meeting, we encourage to leverage your Facebook page and publish those online reporting tools. So to encourage the people to use it as well. So in a nutshell, that's how you can report things to the police. But additional to that, during business hours, if you do attend your local police station on Monday to Friday, 8 to 4, there's always someone working at the office. Like here for Eastern Charlotte at the St. George Detachment, there will be someone available to receive you and to listen to your concern as well. So that's another way to report crime as well. So that's really it about the presentation. So we're opening the floor for...
Yeah, so I mean, I know that there's been lots of hot topics when I was at the priority setting. I know homelessness was a big issue, and some of the issues that have a nexus to crime as a result of that. Obviously, the issue on Deer Island, and of course we had an issue earlier on in Macadam with respect to vigilantism and the concerns that has raised, and so we're putting ourselves here to have our feet held to the fire, and I know it'd be great if people came to use the mic. If you're nervous and you don't want to come up, I totally get that. We'd prefer have you come up here. So with that, we'll open it up.
So John Williamson, many of you know me. I'm a member of Parliament. This came up in the meeting in St. Stephen the other day. I'll just take it off the table. I'm available if you want to talk to me after this meeting. I don't want to take the time from the RCMP here tonight. Tonight should be focused on working with the community, things the police can do better to respond to the community. But you've been asking about the laws in this country. I'm going to give you 4 things that have happened in Parliament in the last 6 to 8 years. And I think you'll be surprised by this. Bill C-75 has made it these are laws now. These have passed Parliament. They were pushed forward by the Liberal government. Bill C-75 made it easier for repeat violent offenders to obtain bail and get back on the streets in our community. Bill C-5 removed mandatory prison time for serious gun, drug, and sex offenses and allows sentences for crimes like sexual assault, kidnapping, drive-by shooting, weapons trafficking to be served through house arrest. Bill C-21 redirects valuable police resources away from criminals and instead focus the police time on trained, tested, and vetted law-abiding firearms owners. This is the bill, or this is now a law you're hearing, where the federal parliament wants, or the federal government wants the police to go after hunters and legal firearms owners. Premier Higgs is resisting this, saying his priority is for the police to go after lawbreakers. And finally, Bill C-83 requires mass murderers like Paul Bernardo, who's been in the news, and other violent criminals to be imprisoned at, quote, in the least restrictive environment for that person, end quote, and has enabled their transfer to lower security prisons. So when you talk about a revolving door, that is the system we have in place. I believe it has to change, working to those ends in Parliament. I'm happy to come back and talk about this. I don't want to take time away from the police, but these men and women are not responsible for the laws. In fact, even the courts are directed by what Parliament decides. And I noticed a few weeks ago, a judge in St. John was even calling for tougher penalties for gun crimes. So the laws we have in Parliament need to change, because these men and women are arresting and rearresting the same people over and over again. Yes, they can do better, I'm sure, at dealing with local issues, and that's why they're here tonight. But again, they're not responsible for writing the laws. Parliament has done that in the last couple of years. We've gone off track. We've gotten soft on criminals, and we've gotten soft on the causes of crime. So I'll leave it at that. If you want to follow up with me, if you want to debate these with me, please contact me. I'm in my office pretty much every week, and I will be until Parliament comes back. Thank you. And I'm going to go soon because I have a toddler to put to get to bed, but I will be watching on CHCO to hear your comments. Thank you.
How you doing? My name's John Calder, and I have just a very simple question, okay? As of late, there is an incident where an individual was throwing rocks at a house, demanding gas, cursing, swearing, threatening the occupants. I have heard that you guys have apprehended him. Thank you. But my question is, and I understand the scope of the area you patrol, so if I have a situation such as that at my house, right, we call 911. My family means everything to me. And if I feel they're threatened, what can I do legally to hold him away from my family until you arrive?
That's not that simple a question.
But it is a question.
Yeah, and
Because I've run into it before. I've chased people off my property before, right? So.
And I'm not going to pigeonhole myself into you put your left foot here and right foot here, grab the guy there. But at the end of the day, in protecting yourself, you can use reasonable force.
Reasonable force. So,
What do you mean by reasonable force?
Well, it's a
well, yeah, like,
can't explain it, and this is why we get into the goofy loop on this. But I'll tell you, okay, here's reasonable. Somebody's breaking into your home, they're leaving, and the police are a long way away, and you decide, and I am not giving you advice to do anything as it relates to that.
right.
But you grab the individual by the shoulders, and you're a bigger, stronger individual, and you sit him down, you say, you're not going anywhere. And we show up, and he's complaining because he's got some minor bruising on his arm, and he says he was assaulted. Well, as a police officer, that is not going to be entertained, and I say your force was reasonable. A case in point of an experience when I was in property crime years and years ago in Vancouver, an individual catching somebody breaking into their home, has him under control, and then proceeds to summarily beat him after he's under control. Not reasonable. And so that is, and if you make the decision to put hands on somebody, there is risk involved. There's risk criminally. There's risk civilly. There's all kind, and so it's you manage that risk.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's a 14-year-old running off your property with something he's stolen, and so this is where we want to be careful about getting into different situations. But essentially, it's under the authority of if you're a citizen's arrest, if you're protecting your property, you have certain rights under the criminal code.
Yes, we do.
And so, but at the same time, no different than a police officer, you have obligations under the criminal code, and if you use force that's not reasonable, you're opening yourself up to prosecution. And that's as simple as I can put it.
That's good. I just want to hear that. So if someone ever did, God forbid, and there was a confrontation, I don't want the criminal charging me because I ruffled his hair or broke his nose. Right?
I can tell you in a circumstance where somebody is at your property, the first piece of action, once you immediately verify everybody's safe, is to call us, call 911.
Yep.
And we have trained dispatchers, like you said, if you call 911, you're jumping every phone line, you're getting through. If somebody's threatening you in your home, that would be a 911 situation.
Right.
They will give you guidance and advice.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, our use of force is subject to review under the criminal code. We, just because we're police officers doesn't mean we're above the law. And,
I totally understand.
you know, I can tell you as somebody that's been in that hot seat and has had my use of force examined by independent agencies, it's not a fun scenario to be in. And I would wish for you and anybody else to not be in that situation. So please call us and we will come and we will deal with that situation like we did the one you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to make sure I
It's a
didn't
good
get myself in trouble if someone decided.
It's, you know, and it's always a hot topic of discussion. And I will say this, you know, in my service, I did have the unfortunate experience to see an individual who intervened and was killed trying to stop somebody from stealing his vehicle.
Yes.
And so there's huge risk involved, but.
You know, as far as vehicles and stuff go, that's what insurance is for. But when it comes to the wife and kids, that's a different ballgame. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being the first to be out there too.
So if you have a man that breaks in your house and you have rights. So let's say a guy like me is a good cook, makes some homemade peanut butter fudge with X-Lax in him. Say, have a feast, buddy. Have a feast on me. Take all my stuff. You think is that legal? Not legal?
You know what? I'm not going to get into being faced with kind of these scenarios. That's not the purpose, all right? I wanted to box that issue up as simply as I could. Anything else, like I said, if you intervene, you're taking on certain risks. But again, you have. There's authority under the criminal code when you're looking out for your own property. So yeah.
So what's our rights to protect our property? What's the rights? What's our rights to protect our property?
I've told you that your right is, as simple as I can put it, is that you can use reasonable force.
Like, I mean, legal advice of that nature, it's really like a lawyer's expertise. Like, as Sergeant Anderson mentioned, every time ourselves we use any kind of force, every situation has its own set of circumstances, and we have to fill different sort of report to capture why we did what we did, which is subject to a review. And annually, we do recertify to be up to speed on what is reasonable versus maybe last year it wasn't. And also, we evolve constantly with what the law is expecting from us as well. I mean, again, like the criminal code, section 25 and section 494 of the criminal code are the two sections you're alluding to here. But to give you legal advice on how it applied to you as a citizen would be really wrong from my side to start telling you how to apply those sections of the code as a citizen. But as Mr. Leclerc explained, it's the wording is what is reasonable to me as a law enforcement agency representative. I mean, given my function, it's different than what would apply to you as well, right? So it's as much as I would like to give you a black and white answer, I don't have that for you.
It comes up and folks, it comes up at every meeting. To kind of bring it off track, and I know that I probably left you with less than satisfactory response, but I'm not your lawyer, and that's really what we can't be giving advice on that. So I'd like to move on to your question. All right.
My name's Karen Kernigan. I'm a resident of St. George, been here all my life. I was part of the group that tried to save the local police department here in the late 80s, early 90s. I wasn't against just coming in, but I know the town chose you people to come in because we had had a fire, and it was costing the town a lot of money to have extra things done, investigations and things. So that was part of the reason why the resources that you people had, that's why we chose you. I didn't choose you, but they did. But anyways, I'm very pleased. I have nothing against the RCMP. My thing is I just don't see the presence of yous in our community. So I think if, in the last few weeks, because of all the complaining, we do see more of your presence. So I really think that's great. But I don't feel comfortable in my town to walk down the street anymore. We've got young people, minors, that are carrying pipes and bats and things that, you know, we shouldn't have to see. So that's upsetting. I'm a senior, and there's lots of seniors in this community. And we had people, Sid and I were talking to people on Sunday night from Nova Scotia, and they were walking down our street. And I had a conversation with them, but I was nervous how far they were going to walk to who they might run into. So thank the Lord they went as far as the post office, and they turned and come back and walked to the motel. But I shouldn't have to feel uneasy about that happening. We're talking about people in cars and things that are out stealing and everything, but we have young people that need help. And I know that you guys are trying the best you can. But there must be something that to make the parents be accountable for these children that are out doing things. I know you're shaking your head, but it's sad, isn't it, that the parents, you know, aren't being accountable. I just think the law is all mixed up. And these kids are going to end up in a mess and end up in jail or prison someday, when it's sad that we can't help them now. But that stuff is going on in our town, and I mean, can't we have a curfew that these kids go in, you know, at a certain time that they have to be in? Can't you pick them up and take them home and eventually charge the parents?
Well, there's a lot there. I appreciate that. You know, that was great to just hear, like, all the different things that you're experiencing as somebody living here. I grew up in Charlotte County. I'm from here. My mom grew up in St. George. I grew up in St. Andrews. My wife's from St. Stephen. I'm about as Charlotte County as it gets. But I'm going to say this. I've policed in other provinces. I've policed across Canada. I've policed in places like Fort McMurray, Alberta. I'm going to tell you, and not to dismiss your concerns, overall, we live in a very safe part of the country. Believe me that. When I say that, we really do. Yeah. Now, that's not to say that what you're seeing is not valid. Yeah. I understand we've had some trends here. I mean, following the pandemic, which literally turned the entire country, entire world on its heels, we've seen some socioeconomic trends here in New Brunswick. We have a population migration. I talked about working in Western Canada 20 years ago. I worked in Alberta when methamphetamine hit Alberta in force it came right across the country. And our property crime spiked. Our incidents of violent confrontations with the police. We'd spike belt vehicles and they'd be driving on all four rims, swerving at our officers. We were using force on people at higher levels of, and this isn't, I don't have any stats to back this up, I'm just telling you what my experience was. So now we've seen some of these trends work their way east. And they're affecting some of the younger people and people that we all know in our communities that we grew up with and went to school with, and we see them and they're a shadow of their former selves. Not saying any names, we all know who we're talking about. There are mechanisms in place to try to help those people that aren't delivered by the police. They're delivered by other government agencies. Maybe it's through a church. There are ways to reach these people. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I'm going to be the solution to that, because we all know I'm not. But what I can tell you is the criminal component of that and the public safety component of that, we will own. But like Superintendent Leclerc said, and like Inspector Saunier said, that all starts with a phone call. And nobody wants to call in on their neighbor or on, somebody that they're friends with, their kid. I get that, because it's a little bit, and there's kind of that whole bystander intervention theory. If I don't call in, somebody else will. Well, if 10 people think the same thing, nobody calls us. Please call. Now, I mean, we're getting more, and we are, like, I mean, I just gave you some examples. We are going out and we are dealing with things. Now, situations where somebody's walking around like a curfew, that's not something I can really speak to. That's a legislative thing, and there's a myriad of issues that come into play there. I don't make the laws like the member of parliament said. We just strictly enforce the ones that are in place. One of the things that I'll say is that, you know, just because you don't see our car driving around doesn't mean we're not working to make your community safe. Police investigations are more intensive now than they were 25 years ago. 25 years ago, I filled out a handwritten report in a car. I stapled it onto a piece of paper. I gave it to our court liaison. Person went to court and was charged. Nowadays, we talked about use of force. There's a 3-page use of force report. If I point a carbine or a pistol at somebody, I fill out a 3-page report talking about my actions. Court briefs, like the things that the courts require to make the mechanisms of justice work, are more intensive. These are things that we have to do to make the product ready for court. So that will require officers to spend more time behind a keyboard than they would have 20, 25 years ago. It's just the way things are. The other thing is that like the types of crime we talked about earlier, I could be driving around your community all night. You'd see me 3 times, but I'm not stopping the sex offender from luring the child online when I do that. I'm making people feel good, but I'm not being effective in dealing with that type of crime. The nature of police work has changed so much in the time since, you know, and naturally that we have to evolve to meet that threat. Superintendent Leclerc spoke earlier about some of our resources being dedicated to specialized investigative teams. I feel that we are evolving to meet the different profiles of crime that we are dealing with, but that changes the way we deliver our service. And I hear you that maybe because you don't see the car drive by as often, you feel less safe. But I can certainly tell you that we are investigating these different kinds of crime, and we are allotting the resources we have to deal with the crime in your community.
I'm not saying I feel less safe. I'm just saying the presence of yous in the community would make a big difference towards our youth, other adults. It's just, if they see you, then
you're preaching to the choir.
you're gonna.
Like,
What I'm saying, if they see you,
because it's something because I understand
Yeah.
that being safe is one thing. Feeling safe is just as important.
Right,
And so you hit on a point that I've heard at community
sure.
meetings like this across the West District. And so I'm, you know, and as the boss, I'm constantly trying to find ways that we can be innovative to connect more.
That was
So for instance, one of the things that we've implemented is that every school has a dedicated officer that connects with principal, and they have that officer that I came from an area where they had a very robust school liaison program, but every school has a police officer that they can connect with. So they're not calling, I mean, ultimately they have to call 911 if there's an issue, but they have that liaison.
Yeah.
So it's trying, as we move towards so much specialization, still maintaining that community contact.
That
And
was-
that's my job. The
yeah.
buck stops with me
Right.
there. And so that's where, you know, I work with Chris and the other sergeants, and I say, like, look, I'm hearing through different channels that we're like, what are we doing? We're leveraging, whenever there's a major event, I want our officers out there connecting with the community.
Yeah.
Any way we can be innovative to leverage and get like more connection, that's my job to make that happen. So you
I'm preaching to the choir, but that was just my concern.
I just want to make sure you understand that I'm not letting go of, well, it's just those days are gone.
Yeah.
We just need to be innovative in how we do it.
Yeah, and like I said, that was our complaint from get-go back in the late 80s, early 90s, that we would lose the presence of our local police, and then things would start spiking.
Yep.
So that's it.
What's the numbers for RSC-10, or can you say what those numbers are for officers? The number of officers for RSC-10?
The actual, like, the number for RC-10 is 38 officers.
38 officers, including resident.
That's not including the specialized service that come to us. So for instance, when the Prime Minister and Cabinet went to St. Andrews, there was a surge capacity. We brought officers in to support that. That doesn't include that, but those are the members that are stationed to those detachments.
Is 38, are those positions, is it currently 38? Like, I'm just wondering if, you know, you have people out that are...
Oh, there's all kinds of reasons. Like, I mean, they're people, right? So,
right.
I mean, police officers are no different than anybody else. They're off for medical reasons. They have leave. They have everything. So, I mean, you know, as far as you know, like, go off for mats and Pat's leave. So that's always in flux.
I guess my question would be, is there any protocol to backfill those positions when members are out, I guess?
For instance, if we need to call in overtime from other areas, we do, and that's not a cost to pass it on to municipalities. So for instance, you know, Grand can be challenging to police just based on the fact that it's an island and they're, you know, if they have a couple of people go down. So then we start reaching out to other areas in the province and we get people down there. And overtime resources cost more than the regular resources, and that's just we can't have those service levels go to a point where they compromise the safety of the community and the officers. So we're constantly moving resources in order to make that happen.
What I can assure you is there's always enough officers on duty to answer calls for service. So, you know, like, can I say how many officers working every day? That's the kind of operational stuff I cannot disclose. We have 38 positions, that's a fact. But how we manage those 38 from within to make sure we always have someone available to deal with the public, it's always
How does the fact that Department of Public Safety is working on the traffic section and doing traffic now, how is that made your life easier, and how much time has it freed up for other activities within the community or within the region, Ted?
Okay. Yeah, I can start. Yeah, so public safety officers are actually at this stage integrated with our tactical traffic unit. So we do have a provincial unit that their sole mandate is to enforce provincial law on the road of the province. So that unit is now being supplemented by justice and public safety. So there's a component, again, it's an integrated approach. So it's not really impacting the file that we're managing for RC10, if that answers your question. Because justice and public safety has always been around with different titles in the past, right? I mean, like, we used to call them DNR, sheriff, just to name, yeah, CVE, commercial. So those units still exist, but under a new structure, I guess. But I guess they had their role before, they still have the same role, but it's just structured differently, I guess.
Yeah, I was just curious, because you see them now issuing, like, laying out the seatbelt tickets on Main Street for the day versus, you know, an RCMP car doing it. So I was just curious if that
Yeah, no, they have that authority, that they're integrated with us to do the traffic enforcement side of it. But Justice and Public Safety are also allowed to assist us with low-risk tasking. For example, if we need to guard a scene pending a search warrant, we can ask them to guard the scene, allowing us to do something else instead of waiting there for hours for the judge to sign the piece of document that we need. So to your question, that's the kind of assistance we're getting, allowing our officers to be more effective at tackling police duty. So that's how GPS can be of great help for a file like that. So they're not allowed to replace us, but we are allowed to use them for certain situations where there's a lower threshold of risk, and that's when we call them in to give us a hand on certain more, again, low-risk tasking that we can use. Yeah.
They also have a level of expertise that relates to kind of navigating like the rural environment. Like, like honestly, our commanding officer is very, very collaborative with the municipal agencies and Justice Public Safety. And I can tell you that we're working together in such a positive way with all, like we have the integrated enforcement units, which is Justice Public Safety and all the municipal agencies, CBSA, and they swoop in when there's like an issue in a community as it relates to drugs or whatever, and you don't see them because they're plainclothes and they do their thing, and they like there's some great work being done all over the province by those integrated units. But yeah, like when I came here, Justice Public Safety, that was kind of a new thing to me because I came from BC, but they've been tremendous to work with. Very different function and mandate, but there's a lot of areas where we can complement each other, and that's been happening more in the last couple of years than in years previous, for sure.
Is it a unionized issue that they can't take over part of your role, or is it a mandate role?
It's more of a piece of standards than anything else. You know, they're just it's a different function. So.
I think about the rising homelessness state in our community, which maybe, you know, a lot of our public are not really familiar with or not used to, for sure. And I guess my question is, like, where does their help come from? Where does your help come from? Because we know this is so tied into their mental health and to their addictions. And, you know, maybe not a lot of people realize that they don't really have the capacity or the competency to wake up one day and say, I need help today, I'm not going to do the drug today. That doesn't really exist for them. So it's just this vicious cycle of continuing to break the law to get that high. They're not going to care who they rob from or who they hurt, but at the same time, these are human beings. We've got, you know, rising vigilantism in our area, which is in itself scary. And we all get that people are frustrated and afraid, but I think about them a lot because they are really at rock bottom. Where does their help come from? And like, where does your help come from to answer to, like, to make some difference? It just seems like it's such a vicious cycle. And I think it's maybe a really big part of the problem, because in this province, it seems like from some of my just experience with social development is that a person is deemed competent unless they're deemed incompetent by the courts. So everybody that's walking around is deemed competent when we know they're not. They don't even have the capacity to wake up in the morning and say, I need help.
The unsheltered is certainly a recent issue for all of Charlotte County. It's a collaborative effort with other provincial agencies, social development, mental health. We are part of the solution, but we work with our partners that when we have interactions with these individuals, and if we feel that that due to their mental state that they are a risk to themselves or someone else, obviously under the Mental Health Act, we have the authority to get them the help that they need, or as well as making referrals to addiction services, mental health, social development. Over the last I guess 9-10 months, St. Stephen had brought in a outreach worker that was working in the community and was seeing a lot of success in liaising with these individuals and providing them with the mechanisms and the direction to go to get help rather than it coming from a police officer. So we can't police our way out of it. We are part of the solution. We will work with our partners, but it is a multifaceted response that comes from the community, comes from, let's say, mental health, addictions, social development. It's a really a multifaceted response that has to happen, and is.
So can you take someone, because if an individual is, like I consider some of these individuals to be, you know, medical emergencies, they're definitely, you know, a threat to public safety and to, you know, to public health. And, you know, they're still walking around. Many of them, if you talk to them, they're really medical emergencies. They ask for help, but they won't ask the right people for help. it just seems like they're still just running from one thing to another.
Yeah, it's, and
And
that's-
we're just not seeing, like, I don't know, maybe we need to get some type of mental health resource, because I know I've called and we can't get mobile mental health
yeah,
here.
the mobile
not
crisis
past-
unit is based out of St.
yeah,
John.
out of, it doesn't go past Musquash.
Yeah,
We
so-
don't have John Howard here anymore, so we seem like we're missing.
Our authorities to take someone to the hospital, like, everything we do has to come from a legislative authority. When, you know, whether it's a call of a suspicious person or just a well-being check, someone's acting strangely on Main Street, the officers will go down and they'll interact with that person and talk to them. And based on the authorities granted to us under the Mental Health Act, it's very stringent as to what will allow us to physically detain that person and take them to the hospital. So if the evidence is there and the need is there and the person, you know, is presenting, you know, what makes it necessary to take them to the hospital, the officers will do that. But it's not every, you know, it's very subjective, and it's, but again, we're told we can only detain that person under a certain circumstance and take them to the hospital where they are assessed. And once they're assessed by the it's completely in the doctor's hands. And then a lot of times they're getting released, they're being referred to mental health to follow up the next few days, and we're also under the
It's, you know, it's a trend across the country, and when I transferred here, it was 2 years ago, I came out of my house hunting trip, and I stayed in Fredericton, and I went for a run around the water, and I was gobsmacked at the homeless camps, because it was like, okay, I knew this was going on in British Columbia, but I didn't think this was happening from PEI, this wasn't happening in the Maritimes, same thing in PEI, I never thought I'd see that in Charlotte, but I mean, like, everybody is dealing with that, and it is such a complex problem. I mean, I work with hub models where you have the health authority, social development, everybody coming to the table trying to, you know, kind of bring this horse to water. But at the end of the day, you know, when addiction hijacks somebody's life, and the byproduct of that is, I got to get my drug, I'm going to break into that vehicle. And so it comes to the police because where are you going to call at 11 o'clock at night when somebody's breaking your vehicle so they get some fair change? They've done 10 vehicles and hopefully get some dope. You're going to call the police, and it falls in our lap. So, yeah, it's a toughie.
Well, I agree. I think people need to call you. And by the way, thank you for everything you do. I certainly appreciate it. And I do think that there needs to be more awareness that people do need to make the calls and not take it on themselves, right? That's dangerous for everybody, so thank you.
And by making that call, again, it will allow us to make those referrals to those support agencies, to have that contact with that individual.
I've made calls. I hope that's maybe a message.
We actually
that
have
can
it
get
built
out.
right into our annual policing priorities as well, to generate those referrals to partner agencies when we have somebody we're dealing with that perhaps the courts or criminality aren't the solution to the problem, whether it's Department of Social Development, various umbrellas under Horizon Health. We'll reach out and make those referrals, and we're actually tracking that and doing that within our planning.
Thanks.
I know as a first aider, if someone refused first aid, your hands are pretty much tied. So it's pretty much the same with mental health. If they refuse your help, there's nothing you can do.
I mean, there's a lot of addiction prevention program, as you said, like whether it's mental health or it's voluntarily basis, right? So there are certain clauses under the Mental Health Act that a person can be forced to receive some help to a certain degree, but there's an expiry date on that, right? So it's
Yes, and it has to meet quite a criteria in order to do that.
Yeah. It's not an easy task.
No, it's not an easy thing to do.
So yeah, to your point, I mean, there's a lot of, as Andy said, you can bring the horse to the water, but
can't make them drink it.
Exactly.
Right? No, that's right.
At the end
it's
of the
day,
day,
cut and dry.
At the end of the day, that's what it is, right? I mean, if they don't recognize the need for help, how can you make that person change, right?
No, that's right.
So acknowledging the issue is the first step, right? So.
And a lot of them that have been in the system for a while know the answers that somebody wants to hear, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's what happens too.
Yeah, and you know, like to feed their addiction at times, they will commit criminal code offenses, and they will they'll find their way in the criminal world, right? And it's unfortunate they have an addiction. It's a social issue. They end up in the justice system to receive some sort of treatment sometime. The justice system can mandate up to 30 days for certain situation of a mental health assessment, but again, that's situational to the situation that we're dealing with. It's not an automatic, but turning to the justice system, the criminal justice system, to solve a social issue, it's not the way it should be, but sometimes that's the way it goes. So, yeah.
Any other questions, folks? Ma'am?
Yes, I live in a community that has a lot of seniors that live alone. And you talk about reasonable restraints and things like that. Like somebody in my condition, what are we going to do? Like, is, say, bear spray legal or any of that stuff? If I blinded somebody, would I be charged? You know, I mean, what are you going to do?
Where's our rights? Where's our rights?
That's the thing. I don't want to, I want to protect myself, but I can't. I'm not able to take someone by the shoulders and say, sit down, and, you know, I'm not in that position.
Is there a specific person, or is there a threat, a particular thing that's going on in that community, or you mean just in general terms?
In general, like I went to Lisa's presentation for the neighborhood watch, but that got shot down and wasn't what I had hoped for. And you know, I'd like to have some ideas, I guess, more or less, to how to better protect myself, and I don't want somebody come barging through my door. And
so you have a group of neighbors that are all in the same area, that
pretty
you're
much,
all like-minded, you all...
We talk and we, you know...
It sounds to me like you're already kind of halfway there. You've gotten to know the people that live around you. You know them. I mean, it's a small community. You're sharing information on your concerns. Certainly, if you're seeing something going on and you're concerned, like whether it's a vehicle or somebody there, please do call us. I mean, we make our patrols. We do that. You know, obviously, would we like to have more cars on the road at any given time? Absolutely. We have the resources we have. We distribute them accordingly. We make patrols. But if you're seeing something in your community, do call us. As far as using force on somebody, I think Superintendent Leclerc really did cover that. Whatever force a person uses to protect themselves or their property has to be reasonable in the circumstances. And it's hard to sort of say what is and what isn't. We're not lawyers. We're not going to give legal advice. I'm certainly going to tell you your best course of action is to call us. That's what we're here for. We're paid. Let us take that risk on your behalf.
If you have a group,
I know, but it would take probably, say, 10 minutes, maybe not that, to get to where I live.
Okay.
A lot can happen in a few minutes.
Sure.
But I think we have to be straight that there's break and enters happening, yes, in Charlotte County. But our houses that people are home during the day, getting like people breaking in your door when you're at home, lights are on, that is very rare. So, you know, everyone has a level of responsibility when it comes to, you know, their own personal security. You should be locking your car doors at night. You shouldn't be leaving your wallet, and you should be locking your garage, locking your door. The days of having the back door that just has the skeleton key lock in the back door, those days are gone, unfortunately. But if you secure your residence and your doors are locked and your lights are on, and people aren't going to bother you for the most part. Do things happen? Yes, but I say that we're not seeing a rash of people breaking into houses when people are home during the day or at night and stuff like that. Most crime is happening when they don't want to get caught. They're not going to. They're going to sneak into your garage and try to steal your weed whacker, versus going into your home where you might hear them coming, and then you call 911 and the police come. So I would say don't be there's a level of concern, but don't think that there's a rash of houses getting broken into while people are home and as such.
And if you have a group like Lisa, like part of that, neighborhood watch stuff and all that I'm a huge fan of that. Like, I was actually part of Block Watch when I was out in British Columbia, and I was getting ongoing information. It's awesome. Lean on Lisa as well. If you've got a group to speak to, you can reach out or to connect with her, and she'll provide some prevention tips or maybe create a presentation for your group. I will say that I could probably cut auto theft by 30% in this province right off the hop, and I think I'm being conservative when I say 30% if you wouldn't leave your keys in the vehicle. I can't believe how many people get their cars stolen in this province because they leave their keys in their vehicle. Well, you know what? You can't do it anymore. Yeah, you can't do it anymore. Anyway, I'm tongue-in-cheek when I say that, but it is like, because I get all the reports, and it's like, keys are with the vehicle, keys are with the vehicle.
So I remember 40 years ago, not that long ago, 5-10 years ago, you could leave your door unlocked in your home, go for a couple hours, come back, you don't have to worry about that stuff. Today, it's not like that whatsoever.
I'd go away for the weekend.
Seasonal properties too are another thing that, I mean, everybody loves camps in New Brunswick. It's what we do. Don't leave things in your camps that, generators, power tools, firearms. Those are things that are hot commodity items for criminals that, are involved in these kinds of thefts. It's a sad lesson to learn. It's a sense of violation, but whatever we can do to minimize that risk, if you're not going to be there, secure that property and take those valuable items out, store them at your primary residence under lock and key.
Then you got some real smart guys that come over to your house and say, yeah, I'll work for you, but I need $1,000 up front. I'll be here first thing in the morning to work on your house. Haven't seen him since. Haven't seen him since. Now he's threatening me, say, come down my house and I'll shove that money down your throat. At least I'll get it back.
Yeah. So folks, we're at 8:10. We're going to stay around here if you want to connect with us one-on-one. If you're not comfortable coming up, we'll take one more question. Otherwise, we'll shut down here now, Your Worship, if that works. And we'll be here. And please approach us, and we can kind of have more personal conversations. We're happy to stick around to have those discussions, if that works. But before you kind of close things off, I just want folks. Honestly, I'm not on the street anymore, but I love getting out and connecting with the community. I'm really passionate about policing and how we can do better. And I know that tonight we did a lot of, hey, we do this great, we do that great, but make no mistake about it. I'm not naive to the fact that we can be doing better and we miss the mark sometimes. That's part of my job, is to look and I say, you know what, Martin, we missed the mark. Our officer didn't do a great job. We need to do a better job, and so that's part of why we're here tonight. But it's really you folks are part of the solution by being here, and so appreciate the hard questions and appreciate the passion. I'm passionate about public safety, and I want you to be safe, and I want you to feel safe, and I really want to thank you for the reception that we got here tonight. I'm not going to lie to you, when I walk into these rooms, I'm not sure how it's going to go. I thought tonight was really constructive, and I would encourage you to keep the conversation going. Chris is a key point of contact for you in St. George, and if there's anything I can do to support, I'm here. So I'm leaving on the piece that I'm looking to how we can evolve, because every organization needs to evolve to survive, and the police, we're no different. So thank you so much for the reception, the questions tonight.
Great. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. These guys are going to stay around here, so if you're still a little bit uncomfortable asking a question here at the podium, just come on up and talk to any of the officers. I want to thank the RCMP for being here tonight. Big round of applause for these guys. Thank you. Want to thank CHCO. They assured me this is going to be on YouTube, right, Ian? It's going to be on YouTube, right? Okay, so you'll be able to watch it again. I want to thank council for being here tonight. I want to thank John Williamson for taking time to coming over tonight and giving us some information on the legalities of the law, what's going on in Ottawa. We learned a lot tonight. I think the biggest thing we learned that we all should be involved in this. The community has to keep calling in. Every time you see something, call it in, call it in, call it in. That's the best thing we can do. We all have to be involved. Great, thank you. Thank you all for coming in tonight. Thank you.